This is an FRG ministry production with the support of our ministry partners and donors.
The Eucharist, the body, blood, soul, divinity of Christ, very often thought of, even amongst Catholics, as being a symbol. Well, I'll tell you this, the Eucharist is not a symbol. When we consume the bread of life, the cup of life, we are not consuming a symbol of the body of Christ or the blood of Christ, but it actually is. And I know many of us don't know how to grasp this because, in a sense, it is a mystery, but it is an incredible grace. Can you imagine God, who is surrounded by angels and saints, God, who is the creator of the universe, decides to become so vulnerable that he becomes in the form of bread and wine, where we can venerate the body and blood of Christ, we can honor God through the Eucharist, we can also abuse of this. And God, being the silent lamb, being led to the slaughter, allows us and trusts us with the Eucharist. How crazy is that God, who is the creator, allows himself to become so vulnerable? It blows my mind. I don't know about you. But you see, this is the thing, even though you cannot understand it, even though you cannot grasp it, even though some of us find it difficult to believe it, it does not change anything. God's grace is still there, his presence is still there, and all you are invited to do is not to understand it, but to approach God, to approach the Eucharist, to adore the Eucharist, and to receive. You see, because once we receive the Eucharist, we become what we consume. We become the body, blood, and soul divinity of Christ in this world, and impossible to do without the Eucharist in our life. I was once studying for a degree in commerce, and as I was studying, I used to sit in the chapel simply because it was the quietest place to study, and I loved Jesus, and I just wanted to spend time in his presence, and I used to go there. And when I went to the chapel to pray, I would see people sleeping and people studying, people talking amongst themselves and people praying. And I was just sitting there one day praying, and I saw this image in my imagination of this gold dust coming out of the presence of the Eucharist. Now, the funny thing was that the gold dust filled the room and people were breathing in this gold dust. Those who were sleeping were breathing in the gold dust. Those who were studying were breathing in the gold dust. Those who were praying were breathing in the gold dust. You see, God's presence is not subjective to our presence. The grace is subjective, but his presence isn't. He will change you if you spend time in his presence. So embrace the Eucharist. Spend time in the Eucharist. Receive the Eucharist and adore the Eucharist. God is present there for you.
This production is only made possible because of the generous support of FRG ministry partners and donors. Please go to frgministry.com/donate to make a donation.